In this video, we'll write our very first program. So what we want to do is we want to create a project. So again, I'm in the Section 4 workspace, and I'm going to right-click on there and say New Project. I'm going to select my default template again, and I'm just going to call this First Program. And I'll select Next and Finish. Now notice that Project 1 is the active project, so I want to be sure that First Program is the active project. So I can just double-click on it, and I can open up that C++ file. That's it. So this is the source code for the first program. Now what I want to do is I want to erase this, and I want you to really just type it in. That way you get used to typing these things in at the beginning. That's probably the best way to do it, is just to follow along. So let me tell you what this program is about. This program is going to ask the user to enter their favorite number, a number between 1 and 100. And then it's going to display, wow, that's amazing, that's my favorite number too. That's it. Okay, so let's start. First thing we need to do is we need to do #include of IOStream. Now as I type, I'm going to press IO, then when I press S, you can see that the code completion is helping me out. It's trying to figure out what I want, and it's giving me its guess as to what I want. And I want IOStream, so I'm just going to select it and close it. There is no semicolon here on this statement. These pound directives, and we'll talk more about what these preprocessor directives are in Section 5, but they don't take semicolons at the end. So I'm going to press Enter, and now we want to create our main function. Remember, the main function is the main entry point. This is the place where execution begins. So we're going to say int main left paren right paren, and then we're going to put a left curly, and the IDE will terminate that left curly with the right curly. We'll talk more about style as we go, but some programmers like to line up their braces like this. Others like to line them up like that. Right now it doesn't matter. Let's just line them up like this. All right, so what do we need to do? We need to prompt the user to enter their favorite number. So how do I do that? I do that with a cout statement. So I'm going to say std, 2 colons, then cout, and we'll do the insertion operator, which inserts something into that stream. Remember, cout is typically tied to your console, your terminal, so the user can type things in. And we're going to display enter your favorite number between, let's say, 1 and 100. And I'll just put a colon there. Now you'll notice that you've got a quote mark and then a terminating quote mark. This is called a string. This is called the string literal. This will be displayed exactly as is. Now this is a statement, so all statements end in a semicolon. Remember, main returns an integer, and that integer is 0 if everything is good. So I'm going to return 0. Right, so if I run this program now, it's all it's going to say is enter your favorite number between 1 and 100. That's it. It's not going to grab the number from anywhere. It's not going to display anything else. We need to somehow read what the user types in on the keyboard. So just like cout writes to the console, cin reads from the console. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say std cin, and now we're going to use the extraction operator because we want to extract information, and it's the same as the insertion operator except going the other way. But now what we're saying is we want to grab whatever the user types in and we want to store it somewhere. Where do we store that? Well, this is where variables come in, and we'll do a lot of talking about variables in Section 6. I'll talk about how do you declare them, how you initialize them, the rules for naming them, and so forth. But declaring variables is very straightforward, so let's do that here. What we do is we tell the compiler, remember the compiler is really dumb, it's not guessing, it does exactly what we tell it to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell it that I want a variable name, and that name is called favorite number. That's where I want you to store what the user typed in. And you also have to tell it what kind of data that is. Is it a string? Is it some big huge structure? No, in this case it's just a whole number, an integer. So we're going to say int space favorite underscore number semicolon. That's it. That's a variable declaration. You've just told the compiler that this variable name right here, favorite number, is an integer. Now I can read information into that. So I can say std, 2 colons, and again, the std will explain later on, it's a namespace, but we definitely need it here. std cin into favorite number. Now again, I'm going to type FAV, and the code completion will try to figure out what I want. So it's going to use favorite number. I can just press enter. Semicolon on the end. So notice what we've done so far. We've included IOStream. Why did we include IOStream? Because we need the input-output libraries. We can't do I/O without it. So we're including it. Now the compiler understands about input and output. It understands cout and cin. They are defined in here. Great. So I'm outputting, enter your favorite number between 1 and 100. Now the user is going to type something at the keyboard, and whatever they type, we're going to store it into favorite number. This guy right there. All right, now we just need to say cout, and I can say something like amazing. That's my favorite number too. Here we can do an end line, so we flush the buffers and print out to the next line. That's it. So let's go through this again one more time. We've got a main function. This is the entry point. This is where execution begins. All C++ programs must have a main function. All C++ programs must only have exactly one main function. So when the program begins to execute, this is where it starts. Here I've defined a variable called favorite number, and it's an integer. It can only hold whole numbers. I'm outputting to the console, enter your favorite number between 1 and 100. The user is now going to input something into the console, a number, and I'm going to read it and store it into that location, into that variable, into that box. Then I'm going to say cout, amazing, that's my favorite number too. And I'm just going to print end line at the end. That'll flush out the buffers and move the cursor over to the next line. Finally, I return 0. Everything's good. Now, next thing to do is to build this program. Program's not going to run by itself. We need to compile it, we need to link it, and then we need to execute it. That whole process of compiling and linking is called building. Now, you'll notice that when you right-click on that source file right here, main CPP, you see it says compile. Now, if I press that, it's going to compile our program, and you can see here, 0 errors, 0 warnings. We'll talk about what happens if you get errors and warnings a little bit later. Also notice that we're using the C++ 14 standard, which is what we want to use. That's what we did when we set up that default template, if you recall. What we need to do next is to build the project by compiling and linking. That's going to create the exe file on Windows or the executable files on Linux and Mac. And we'll do that in the next video.